Hey everyone! We are working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content and it is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button right now as we proceed. The idea of a trade like this sounds absolutely absurd at first glance. And maybe that's exactly why it's starting to make perfect sense right now. Because when a team spends months systematically tearing down important pieces, stockpiling prospects like they're preparing for the apocalypse, clearing salary and roster space, and yet still keeps one specific name circulating in trade rumors over and over again, that's not just noise. That's not media speculation. That's direction. That's intentional. JOJO Romero has not been forgotten in St. Louis. He is available, he is being shopped, and the Toronto Blue Jays know it. Welcome back to the channel, folks. Today we're diving deep into one of the most uncomfortable, most polarizing, and potentially most brilliant trade proposals that's been gaining serious momentum behind the scenes. And I need you to stick with me here because your initial reaction is probably going to be to hate this trade. But by the time we're done breaking down every angle, every implication, every piece of strategic chess being played by both front offices, you might just change your mind. The proposal itself is simple on paper, almost suspiciously clean for a move that carries this much underlying tension. The St. Louis Cardinals send left-handed reliever JOJO Romero to Toronto. The Blue Jays send outfielder Schneider to St. Louis. That's it. No inflated prospect packages, no multiple names being thrown around, no creative contract gymnastics, just two organizational needs meeting halfway in the most direct way possible. And that's exactly where the discomfort begins for both fanbases, because this type of trade is never really about what's written down on paper. It's about what's missing from each roster, what each team is desperately trying to fix before opening day arrives and the problems become impossible to ignore. Let's start by understanding what the St. Louis Cardinals have been doing all off-season, because their strategy has been absolutely ruthless in a way we rarely see from that organization. The Cardinals spent the entire winter doing something they almost never do publicly and openly. They dismantled their competitive core piece by piece. Wilson Contreras, gone. Sonny Gray, gone. Nolan Arenado, traded away in a move that shocked the baseball world. Brendan Donovan, shipped out. 4 absolutely massive moves in a relatively short span of time, all pointing in the exact same direction. This is real rebuilding, folks. This is not competitive window dressing where you pretend to retool while still trying to win. This is Chaim Bloom, the new architect in St. Louis, implementing a complete philosophical overhaul. Those trades accomplished several critical objectives. They stocked the farm system with young talent and high-upside prospects. They created massive financial breathing room under the luxury tax threshold. And they bought Chaim Bloom the time and flexibility to implement his long-term vision without the immediate crushing pressure to win 95 games right now. But then comes the detail that completely breaks the pattern and reveals the true strategy. If the logic were purely to accumulate as many prospects as humanly possible, JOJO Romero would have been moved months ago in some random package deal. A quality left-handed reliever has real trade value. Teams are always looking for bullpen help. He could have been flipped easily. And yet he wasn't. He stayed on the roster. His name gets mentioned constantly in trade discussions. Teams have checked in on his availability. But he hasn't been moved. And that tells you absolutely everything you need to know about what St. Louis is actually looking for in return, because when a front office deliberately holds onto a valuable reliever in the absolute middle of a declared teardown and rebuild, it's because they don't want just anything coming back. They don't want a lottery ticket prospect who might develop in 4 years. They want immediate fit. They want a player who can contribute right now while the rebuild is happening. Chaim Bloom has been incredibly public and direct about this. He's looking for a right-hand outfield bat. Not a distant prospect buried in a ball. Not a 2-year development project. A player who arrives on day 1, puts on the Cardinals uniform, and plays competent Major League Baseball immediately. And when you look at the current market for right-hand outfield bats, the response is basically deafening silence. Austin Hayes, one of the few quality options available, came off the board after signing with the Chicago White Sox. The free agent market has essentially evaporated at this position. There's nobody left worth signing. So what's left as an option? A trade. And when you start cross-referencing that specific organizational need with the Toronto Blue Jays' current roster construction and their surplus situations, one name starts to stand out almost against everyone's will. Davis Schneider. Now, Schneider was never exactly a problem in Toronto. Let's be very clear about that. He was never a clubhouse cancer or a defensive liability or a guy who couldn't hit major league pitching. But he was also never truly a priority in the long-term plans either. He has one very clear, very specific skill that he does exceptionally well. He absolutely destroys left-handed pitching. That's not theoretical. That's not projected. That's proven in actual major league games. Just ask Blake Snell, who got absolutely torched by Schneider multiple times. The man can hit lefties with the best of them. But here's where the roster reality becomes impossible to ignore. The Blue Jays roster construction changed dramatically this offseason, and it changed fast. The signing of Japanese superstar Kaz Okamoto immediately pushed Addison Barger into a full-time right field role. That move automatically pushed George Springer, the former All-Star, into a permanent designated hitter role. Anthony Santander, who just signed a 5-year, $92.5 million contract, needs consistent playing time in left field, especially after an injury-plagued 2025 season. Nathan Lukes is still occupying a roster spot. Miles Straw fills the defensive specialist and speed reserve role. The outfield depth chart essentially closed on Davis Schneider. Not because he got worse as a player. Not because he lost his ability. But because the roster simply moved on without him. There's no clear path to consistent playing time anymore. And here's the brutal truth that nobody in baseball likes to admit publicly. Competitive teams that are trying to win championships don't make trades out of sympathy or loyalty to players. They trade for fit. They trade to maximize roster construction. For Toronto, Davis Schneider has become organizational redundancy. A useful player without a clear everyday role. But for St. Louis, he represents an immediate solution. A proven right-hand bat capable of punishing left-handed pitching, stepping directly into an outfield that was deliberately and systematically emptied. He's not a superstar. He's not going to make all-star teams. But he's functional, productive, and major league ready. And in a well-executed rebuild, functionality and stability matter enormously. Now flip the board completely and look at this trade from Toronto's perspective, because this is where it gets really interesting. Toronto is absolutely not rebuilding. They are in a win-now window with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette still on the roster. And if there's one single thing that absolutely sabotaged the Blue Jays last season, it wasn't the offense. The offense was fine. It was the bullpen. Specifically, it was the end of games. The bullpen simply could not shut the door in close situations. Close games turned into agonizing frustration. Small leads evaporated in the 7th and 8th innings. It's not an exaggeration to say that bullpen failures shaped the entire disappointing season. And that's where JOJO Romero enters this equation as a surgical addition. Romero doesn't arrive to be the face of the bullpen or the closer getting all the headlines. He arrives to stabilize absolute chaos. A reliable left-handed arm in high-leverage late-inning situations. Someone who lets the manager actually breathe when the opposing lineup starts stacking left-handed bats in the 8th or 9th inning. That kind of reliable bullpen help doesn't just magically appear on the free agent market. And when it does become available, it's incredibly expensive. Toronto has the capital to pay for it. Just not in cash or prospect capital, but in surplus roster pieces like Davis Schneider. Here's the question that absolutely defines whether this trade makes sense. Who is actually giving up more real, tangible value? At first glance, Toronto gives up a young player with legitimate offensive upside for a reliever, and the internet immediately hates that kind of deal. Relievers are volatile. They are unpredictable. But baseball doesn't exist in a vacuum. Context matters enormously. Romero isn't a luxury acquisition for the Blue Jays. He's a direct fix for a structural flaw that cost them games last season. Without a reliable bullpen, offensive talent turns into empty numbers that don't translate to wins. With a solid bullpen, every single run scored becomes exponentially more valuable. And for the Cardinals, Schneider isn't some consolation prize or throw-in player. He's a legitimate foundation piece for the rebuild. A player who can step in on opening day, give the lineup immediate competitiveness and respectability, and help create a functional competitive environment while all those newly acquired prospects develop in the minor leagues. Chaim Bloom isn't trying to build a team that wins 100 games next season. He's building a team with clear identity and purpose, and that philosophical clarity changes everything about how you evaluate moves. There's also the human factor and the risk assessment that rarely makes headlines but matters enormously to front offices. Relievers live under constant career risk. One bad year, one injury, one mechanical adjustment that doesn't work, and the trade value completely collapses. For St. Louis, trading Romero right now is selling at the absolute peak of his value before the natural wear and volatility of the relief pitcher position inevitably shows up. Schneider, as a position player, offers significantly more long-term predictability, less volatility, more day-to-day roster control. Here's the reality nobody wants to face. Opening day is right around the corner. Spring training is already underway. There's no time left for long developmental experiments or let's see how this plays out by mid-season approaches. Either you fix your roster problems right now, or they become the dominant storyline for the entire year. Toronto knows this intimately after last season's bullpen disasters. So here's my final take. Toronto gains bullpen stability. They gain late-inning depth. They gain a legitimate chance to convert tight games into actual wins. Yes, they lose a useful player, but one who no longer had a clear everyday role. St. Louis gains a right-hand outfielder. They gain immediate production. They gain someone who helps make the rebuild watchable and competitive without abandoning the long-term vision. Yes, they lose a valuable reliever, but at exactly the right moment before volatility destroys his value. This isn't a headline-grabbing, history-book trade. It's an adult trade between two organizations with completely different timelines making a mutually beneficial swap. And maybe that's exactly why it's taking time to finalize. So here's what I need from you right now. If this trade happens tomorrow, would you make this move if you were running the Blue Jays? Or would you hold on to Schneider and pray the bullpen magically fixes itself? Drop your honest opinion in the comments because this decision absolutely splits fan bases. Smash that like button if you want more trade analysis like this. And subscribe with notifications on because we're tracking every development as opening day approaches.